Emily Mitchell stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the darkness below. She had been putting this off for 3 years, 3 full years of living in this house, walking past that door every single day, telling herself she would deal with it eventually, but eventually had a way of never arriving. The basement wasn't dangerous, it wasn't flooded or infested with anything, it was just full. Full of boxes, full of furniture, full of the accumulated belongings of a man she barely knew. Her uncle, the man who left her this house when he died. She inherited the property not because they were close, but because there was no one else. Her uncle had never married, no children, no siblings still living. Emily was it, the last branch on a family tree that had grown smaller with each generation. When the lawyer called to tell her about the inheritance, she had been surprised. She knew her uncle existed, had met him maybe 4 or 5 times at family gatherings when she was younger, but they had never been close. He was quiet, kept to himself, lived alone in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. She remembered him as polite but distant, the kind of person who nodded hello and then disappeared into another room. The house itself was modest. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with appliances that looked like they hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The roof was old. The windows rattled when the wind picked up. The floors creaked in certain spots. But it was paid off, and that mattered. Emily had been renting a cramped apartment in Philadelphia at the time, paying more than half her income just to have a place to sleep. When she found out the house was hers, mortgage-free, she made the decision quickly. She quit her lease, packed everything she owned into her aging sedan, and moved 2 hours west to a town she had never really known. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of working remotely as a freelance graphic designer, taking on whatever projects she could find to cover bills. 3 years of learning how to live alone in a house that still felt like it belonged to someone else. 3 years of walking past that basement door and telling herself she would clean it out when she had time. Emily was 32 years old. She had a degree in design from a state university and about $60,000 in student loan debt. She also had credit card balances from her 20s, back when she thought things would get easier after graduation. They hadn't. Freelancing paid the bills barely, but there was never extra. Never enough to save, never enough to take a vacation, never enough to stop worrying about what would happen if her car broke down or her laptop died. The house being paid off helped, but property taxes still came due. Utilities still needed to be covered. Groceries still cost money. She lived carefully. She bought generic brands at the supermarket. She skipped dinners out with friends. She said no to trips and concerts and anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. It wasn't the life she imagined when she was younger, but it was stable, mostly stable, as long as nothing went wrong. That Saturday morning in late September started the way most of her mornings started: coffee at the kitchen table, laptop open, emails from clients asking for revisions or updates, a few new project inquiries that might turn into paying work if she responded quickly enough. She worked through the messages, replied to the ones that mattered, archived the rest. By 11, she was caught up. The house was quiet. Sunlight came through the kitchen window at an angle that made the dust in the air visible. She stood up and walked to the basement door. She had been thinking about it all week, not because she suddenly felt motivated, but because she had received a letter from her homeowner's insurance company. They needed an updated inventory of the property. They wanted to know what was stored in the house, what the value of her belongings was, whether there were any risks they should know about. The letter gave her 30 days to respond. That deadline was getting closer. Emily opened the door and flipped the light switch. A single bulb hung from the ceiling at the bottom of the stairs, casting weak yellow light that barely reached the corners of the room. The stairs were wooden, old, each step creaking under her weight as she descended. The air smelled like concrete and old paper. It was cooler down here even in September, the kind of coolness that made you aware of how much earth was pressing in around the foundation. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, cinder block walls, exposed beams overhead. Boxes were stacked against one wall, some labeled in her uncle's shaky handwriting, others blank. There was an old workbench in one corner, covered in dust. A metal shelf unit held paint cans and tools that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. In the far corner, a stack of furniture was covered with a tarp. Emily had glanced at all of this when she first moved in, decided it could wait, and hadn't come back down since. She grabbed the nearest box and tested its weight. Not too heavy. She carried it upstairs to the living room where the light was better and set it on the coffee table. The cardboard was soft with age, the corners bent and worn. She opened the flaps and looked inside. Tax documents, stacks of them, bound with rubber bands that had dried out and cracked. Returns from the 1980s and 90s, organized by year. Emily flipped through a few, not sure what she was looking for. Her uncle's name on every form. Income from a machine shop. Deductions for property tax. Nothing unusual. She set the box aside and went back downstairs. The second box contained photographs, hundreds of them, loose, in no particular order. Black and white images mixed with faded color prints. Emily carried the box upstairs and sat on the couch, sorting through them slowly. A young couple standing in front of a car from the 1950s. A group of men in work clothes, arms crossed, squinting into the sun. Her uncle as a child, maybe 7 or 8, holding a fishing rod on the bank of a river. She didn't recognize most of the people. Relatives, probably, from a time before she was born. She spent half an hour looking through the photos, then stacked them back in the box and set it with the first one. The third box was heavier. When Emily lifted it, she felt the weight shift inside. She carried it upstairs and set it on the floor next to the couch. This one was packed tighter than the others. When she opened it, she found layers of old letters tied with string, ledgers with faded covers, envelopes yellowed with age. And at the very bottom, underneath everything else, 3 hardback books stacked neatly on top of each other. The books stood out. Everything else in the box was loose paper, documents, receipts. But these books were placed deliberately, as if someone had taken care to position them just so. Emily pulled them out one at a time and set them on the coffee table. The first was bound in dark green cloth, the title embossed on the spine in gold lettering that had mostly worn away. She could make out a few words, something about American history. The second book was similar, deep blue cloth, also about history. The third was burgundy, thicker than the other two, with no visible title on the spine at all. Emily sat back and looked at them. They didn't seem particularly old or valuable, just 3 books that someone had tucked into a box and forgotten about. She picked up the green one and opened it to the first page. The paper was yellowed, brittle at the edges. The text was small, dense, printed in an old-fashioned typeface. She turned the page, then another. But something felt wrong. The pages didn't move the way they should. They felt stiff, resistant. She tried to flip to the middle of the book, but the pages wouldn't separate. It was as if they had been glued together. She set the green book down and picked up the blue one. Same thing. The pages were stuck. She pressed her thumb against the edge, trying to pry them apart, but they wouldn't budge. A thought crossed her mind. She had seen something like this before, years ago, in a movie or maybe a magazine article. Hollow books, books that had been altered, carved out, turned into containers for hiding things. Emily stood up and carried the green book to the kitchen. She opened a drawer and found a butter knife, the kind with a dull edge that couldn't cut anything. She slid the tip of the knife between the cover and the first page, then worked it slowly along the seam. There was resistance, then a soft popping sound as the glue gave way. The cover lifted. Underneath, the pages had been carved out, a rectangular compartment about an inch deep, lined with dark felt that had faded to grey, and inside that compartment, arranged in 4 neat rows of 3, were 12 gold coins. Emily stood perfectly still. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just stared down at the open book on her kitchen counter, at the 12 gold coins sitting in their felt-lined compartment, gleaming softly under the overhead light. Her first thought was that they couldn't be real. They had to be replicas, souvenirs, something decorative. But when she reached out and picked one up, the weight told her otherwise. It was heavy, denser than she expected, cold to the touch. She turned the coin over in her fingers. On one side was a profile of a woman wearing a crown, the word liberty inscribed above her head. On the other side was an eagle with spread wings, clutching arrows and an olive branch. Around the edge were stars and the words United States of America. And at the bottom, a date, 1876. Emily set the coin down carefully and picked up another, 1882. Then another, 1891. All of them different dates, all of them from the late 1800s. She counted them again to be sure. 12 coins, 12 pieces of gold, each one over a century old. Her hands were shaking now. She set the green book aside and reached for the blue one. She used the butter knife again, working the blade along the edge of the cover until it lifted. Inside, another compartment. This one held 14 coins. Same style, same weight, different dates. Some from the 1870s, some from the early 1900s. She counted them twice. 14. The burgundy book was still sitting on the coffee table in the living room. Emily walked back to get it, moving slowly, aware that her legs felt unsteady. She carried it to the kitchen and set it down next to the other two. This book was thicker, heavier. When she pried the cover open, she found a deeper compartment. 15 coins, larger than the others, heavier, with different designs. She counted them carefully, touching each one to make sure it was real. 15. 41 gold coins in total. Emily stood in her kitchen, surrounded by 3 hollow books, and tried to process what she was looking at. Her uncle had hidden these, or someone before him had. They had carved out these books, lined them with felt, placed the coins inside, and then packed the books into a box with old documents and letters. They had hidden a fortune in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary, something no one would think to look at twice. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to call or who to trust. She stood there for a long time, just staring at the coins, trying to understand how this could be real. Her uncle had lived in this house for decades. He had worked as a machinist at a factory in town. He drove an old truck. He shopped at the same grocery store every week. He never took vacations, never bought anything extravagant, never did anything that suggested he had money. And the whole time, 41 gold coins had been sitting in his basement, hidden inside 3 books, waiting. Emily finally moved. She pulled out her phone and opened a search engine. She typed in the words she could see on the coins: Liberty Head, Double Eagle, Gold Coin. The results came back immediately, page after page of auction listings, collector sites, price guides. Even the most common gold coins from that era were worth thousands of dollars. Some were worth tens of thousands. A few, depending on their condition and rarity, were worth hundreds of thousands. She scrolled through the listings, her heart pounding. She clicked on images that looked similar to her coins. She read descriptions of mint marks and grading standards and terms she didn't understand. But the numbers were clear. These coins were valuable, not just valuable in a small way, valuable in a way that could change everything. Emily put her phone down and sat at the kitchen table. She felt dizzy. Her mouth was dry. She kept looking at the coins, lined up in rows on the counter, glinting under the light. This didn't happen to people like her, people who struggled to pay bills, people who worked alone in spare bedrooms, hoping clients would pay on time, people who said no to dinners out because $20 mattered. But it was happening. The coins were real. She could see them. She could touch them. She could feel their weight in her hand. And they belonged to her now. Her uncle had left her this house and everything in it, and that included 3 books with 41 gold coins hidden inside. The rest of that day passed in a haze. Emily couldn't focus on anything else. She kept going back to the kitchen, checking to make sure the coins were still there, that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. She took photos of them with her phone. She searched online for more information, trying to figure out what she had. But the more she read, the more she realized she had no idea what she was dealing with. The coins all looked similar, but small details mattered. Mint marks, condition, year, variations in design, things she couldn't see or didn't know how to identify. By evening, she had made a decision. She needed professional help. She couldn't do this alone. She searched for coin dealers in the area and found one in Philadelphia with good reviews and a solid reputation. She sent an email explaining that she had inherited some old gold coins and needed them appraised. The response came back within an hour. They could see her Monday afternoon if she could make the drive. That night, Emily barely slept. She kept thinking about the coins, about what they might be worth, about what she could do with that money. Pay off her student loans, pay off the credit cards, fix the roof, replace her car, which was 15 years old and made a rattling sound when she accelerated. Maybe take a vacation, maybe breathe without constantly worrying about money. But she also kept thinking about the risk. What if someone found out? What if she was robbed? What if the dealer wasn't honest? She had read stories about people being cheated, about valuable items being swapped for fakes, about scams and fraud. She didn't know this dealer. She didn't know who to trust. She got out of bed and went to the kitchen. She gathered the coins and placed them back into the 3 books, then carried the books to her bedroom. She found an old metal toolbox in the garage, the kind with a lock, and put the books inside. She locked it and hid the toolbox in her closet, buried under a pile of clothes and blankets. It felt absurd, hiding gold coins in a closet like something out of a movie, but she didn't know what else to do. Monday morning came slowly. Emily woke up early, her stomach tight with nerves. She showered, dressed, packed the coins carefully into a small padded bag. She wrapped each one in tissue paper, making sure they wouldn't scratch or damage each other. She put the bag in her backpack and locked the house behind her. The drive to Philadelphia took 2 hours. Emily kept checking her rearview mirror, irrationally convinced that someone was following her. She gripped the steering wheel too tightly. Her shoulders ached by the time she reached the city. The coin shop was in a quiet neighborhood, tucked between a dry cleaner and a bakery. The front window displayed cases of coins and currency behind glass. A bell chimed when she pushed the door open. The man behind the counter was older, maybe in his early 60s, with grey hair and reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. He looked up and smiled. Emily introduced herself. He remembered her email, shook her hand, and led her to a back room with a workbench and bright overhead lights. She set her backpack on the table and carefully removed the padded bag. She unwrapped the coins one at a time, placing them on a soft cloth he had spread across the bench. The dealer didn't say anything at first. He just picked up the first coin, examined it under a magnifying lamp, turned it over, checked the edges. He set it down and picked up another. Then another. His expression didn't change. He worked methodically, moving from one coin to the next, taking his time. After about 30 minutes, he set the last coin down and leaned back in his chair. He looked at Emily and asked where she got them. She explained about her uncle, the house, the basement, the box with the 3 books. He nodded slowly, then asked if she had any documentation, receipts, letters, anything that explained where the coins came from. Emily shook her head. Just the books. The dealer folded his arms and studied the coins on the table. He told her she had something genuinely rare. Not just valuable, but rare in a way that mattered to collectors. Most of the coins were in excellent condition, which was more important than she probably realized. Coins that had been circulated, handled, spent in stores and passed from hand to hand, lost detail. Coins that had been stored carefully, protected from air and moisture and handling, retained their sharpness. These coins had been protected. Whoever hid them knew what they were doing. He started going through them one by one, explaining what she had. Liberty Head double eagles from the 1870s and 80s. St. Gordon's double eagles from the early 1900s. He pointed out details she never would have noticed on her own. A small mint mark on one coin that indicated it was made in San Francisco instead of Philadelphia. A double die error on another that made it more valuable. A proof finish on a third that meant it was never intended for circulation. When he finished, he told her he couldn't give her an exact appraisal without sending some of the coins out for professional grading. The grading process could take several weeks. But based on what he could see, based on his experience and the current market, he estimated the collection was worth somewhere between $6 and $8 million. Emily heard the number, but it didn't register. She asked him to repeat it. He did. 6 to 8 million. He explained that the final value would depend on grading, market conditions, and how she chose to sell. Auction houses would take a percentage, usually around 15 to 20%. Private sales might bring more, but carried risks. Grading services charged fees. Taxes would apply. But even after all of that, she was looking at life-changing money. She sat there in silence, staring at the coins spread across the workbench. The dealer asked if she was all right. She nodded, but she wasn't sure. The room felt too bright, too warm. He offered her water. She accepted, sipping it slowly, trying to steady her breathing. He recommended she have the coins professionally graded through a service like PCGS or NGC. Both were respected in the industry. Once graded, she could decide whether to auction them, sell them privately, or hold on to them. He also recommended she talk to a lawyer and an accountant before making any decisions. Money like this brought complications: estate taxes, capital gains, legal questions if any other relatives came forward claiming a share. Emily thanked him and carefully packed the coins back into the padded bag. He walked her to the door and handed her his business card. He told her to call if she had questions or needed help navigating the process. She drove home in a daze, barely aware of the road. When she got back to the house, she locked the door behind her, went straight to her bedroom and put the coins back in the toolbox. Then she sat on the edge of her bed and cried. It wasn't sadness, it was relief. It was disbelief. It was the sudden, overwhelming realization that everything was about to change. For 3 years she had lived in this house, struggling to make ends meet, wondering how she was going to pay off debt that seemed to grow no matter what she did. And the whole time, 41 gold coins had been sitting in the basement, hidden inside 3 books that looked too ordinary to notice. Over the next few weeks, Emily followed the dealer's advice step by step. She contacted PCGS and arranged to have the coins professionally graded. The process required her to ship the coins to their facility in California, which made her nervous, but the dealer assured her they were insured and secure. She found a lawyer who specialized in estate law and inheritance issues. She met with an accountant who explained the tax implications in detail. Every step of the process felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. The grading results came back in early November. The dealer had been conservative in his estimate. Several of the coins graded higher than expected. One of the St. Gordon's coins from 1907 was in near-perfect condition and received a grade that put it in the top tier of surviving examples. Another coin, a Liberty Head from 1876, had a rare mint error that significantly increased its value. The final appraised value, based on the grades and current market conditions, came in at $6.9 million. Emily read the number on the official document 3 times before it started to sink in. 6.9 million, not 8, not 5. 6.9. She called the dealer and asked what came next. He walked her through her options. She could auction the coins through a major house like Heritage or Stack's Bowers. She could sell them privately to collectors or dealers. She could hold on to them and wait for the market to appreciate. Each option had advantages and risks. She spent a week thinking it over. She talked to the lawyer. She talked to the accountant. She read articles about the coin market, about auction trends, about how collectors made decisions. In the end, she decided on a combination approach. The rarest coins, the ones with the highest grades and the most collector interest, would go to auction through Heritage Auctions in New York. The rest would be sold privately to dealers and collectors the Philadelphia dealer connected her with. The auction took place in February. Emily didn't attend in person. She watched online from her living room, refreshing the page every few seconds as bids came in. The 1907 St. Gordon's sold for $940,000. The 1876 Liberty Head, with the mint error, sold for $720,000. Other coins sold for amounts that ranged from $50,000 to $300,000. By the end of the auction, the total came to just over $4 million. The private sales took longer, but eventually brought in another $2.3 million. After auction fees, grading costs, legal fees, and taxes, Emily walked away with just over $4.8 million. It was less than the appraised value, but it was still more money than she had ever imagined having. The first thing she did was pay off her student loans. $60,000 gone in a single transaction. Then, the credit cards. Another $12,000. It felt strange watching those balances drop to zero. She had been carrying that debt for so long, it had become part of her identity. And now, it was just gone. She hired a contractor to fix the roof. to replace the windows, to renovate the kitchen and bathroom. The work took 3 months, but when it was done, the house felt like hers for the first time. Not her uncle's house, hers. She didn't quit freelancing. She liked graphic design. She liked working for herself. But she stopped taking projects she didn't enjoy. She stopped saying yes to clients who paid late or made endless revisions. She started charging what her work was worth. And when someone couldn't afford her rates, she said no without feeling guilty. She bought a new car. Nothing extravagant. Just a reliable sedan with air conditioning that worked and seats that didn't have tears in them. She took a vacation. 2 weeks in Europe. Something she had dreamed about since college, but never thought she could afford. She visited museums and cafes and walked through cities she had only seen in photographs. She also set money aside, investments, savings, a financial cushion that meant she would never have to worry about an unexpected expense again. She donated to causes she cared about. She helped a friend who was struggling with medical bills. She didn't tell most people about the coins. A few close friends knew, but she kept it quiet. Money like that changed how people saw you, and she didn't want that. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this one, more discoveries that changed everything, more reminders that fortune can be hiding in the most unexpected places. Hit the like button if this made you think about what might be sitting in your own basement or attic. And share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes life can surprise you when you least expect it. Looking back, Emily realized how close she came to never finding the coins at all. If the insurance company hadn't asked for an inventory, she might have left those boxes in the basement for years. If she had thrown out the books without opening them, the coins would have ended up in a landfill or a thrift store. If she had opened just one book, found the coins, and assumed that was all there was, she would have missed the other 2. 41 gold coins, 3 hollow books, 1 box in a basement. It had all been sitting there, waiting, while she worried about bills and scraped by month after month. The fortune had been beneath her feet the entire time, hidden in plain sight, inside objects that looked too ordinary to notice. She thought about her uncle often. She wished she had known him better. She wished she could ask him about the coins, about where they came from and why he hid them the way he did. There were no letters explaining it, no notes, no clues. Maybe he inherited the coins himself. Maybe he bought them over the years, one at a time, saving and hiding them because he didn't trust banks. Maybe someone gave them to him. She would never know. But in a way, the mystery was part of the gift. He left her more than money. He left her a story, a moment of transformation, a reminder that life could change in an instant, that fortunes could be found in the most ordinary places, and that sometimes the most valuable things were the ones that didn't look valuable at all. The books themselves became a reminder. Emily kept them, even after she removed the coins. She placed them on a shelf in her living room, 3 hollow volumes that once held a fortune. Guests who visited never noticed them. They looked like any other old books, the kind you might find at a yard sale or in a used bookstore. But Emily knew what they were. She knew what they had hidden. And every time she looked at them, she remembered. She started looking at the world differently after that. She paid more attention to details. She stopped assuming that things were what they appeared to be. She learned that value didn't always announce itself, that fortunes could be hidden anywhere, and that sometimes the difference between struggle and security was nothing more than opening the right box on the right day. Years later, Emily still lives in the house. She lives there by choice now, not necessity. The basement is clean and organized. The boxes have been sorted through, the old documents filed or discarded. There are no more hidden compartments, no more secrets waiting to be found. But she still checks sometimes, just in case. Because once you find a fortune in a place you never thought to look, you never stop wondering what else might be out there. The story of the 3 books is a reminder that life can surprise us, that the things we inherit, the places we overlook, the objects we take for granted might hold more than we realize, that sometimes the most ordinary moments lead to the most extraordinary discoveries, and that paying attention, being curious, taking the time to look closely at what's in front of us can make all the difference. Emily's life changed because she opened a box, because she noticed something that didn't quite fit, because she trusted her instincts and took the time to investigate. She didn't find the coins because she was lucky. She found them because she paid attention. And that's a lesson worth remembering. Fortune can be hidden anywhere, in basements and attics, in boxes and drawers, in objects that seem too simple to matter. It waits quietly year after year, decade after decade, for someone to notice, for someone to look closely, for someone to realize that not everything is what it seems. The 3 books that changed Emily's life are still on her shelf. They're empty now, but they're not worthless. They're a reminder, a symbol, a piece of history that connects her to a past she never fully understood and a future she never imagined. They're proof that sometimes the most valuable things don't shine or announce themselves. They just sit quietly, waiting for the right person to find them at the right time. And maybe that's the real fortune, not the money, though the money helped, but the reminder that life is full of hidden possibilities, that we're surrounded by things we don't fully understand, that mysteries exist in the most ordinary places, and that sometimes all it takes to change everything is the willingness to open a box, look inside, and see what's been there all along, waiting beneath the surface of everyday life.